thing Machiavelli used to make a living advising Italian princes about. As for the toyless children, it's no use having them just sitting there doing nothing. They should be doing something useful. Otherwise they'll be causing trouble. They need to be put to work. Well, a kindergarten should have new toys, shouldn't it? That's what it's there for. Well, that's what the toyless can do. They can make new toys for Rex. And in return, Rex might pay them with a little bit of temporary playtime. Call it holiday, or weekend, or leisure. Instead of toyless, they can be toilers. The dispossessed class can become a working class. They're kept too busy to think straight, and Rex gets more and more toys. Great. But there's more. Rex has got ambitions for expansion. And he's got his eye on a kindergarten over the road, and all the lovely toys in there. Not only that, but he's worried. His opposite number over there might be thinking about expansion too, into Rex's territory. What Rex needs to do is act first. Get across that main road with a big toy army. And don't forget, he can explain to all the children that it's all a question of defense, ideology. Well, we've come a long way in a short time. How different it all was a moment ago. Remember the original kindergarten? The kids were all equals. They shared the toys. It was pretty much peace and harmony most of the time. If any kids whisper about those days now, Rex will have them beaten up or put in the corner or the sin bin, or just laughed at. Equality, peace, harmony, sharing. That's just a utopia, an idle dream, a kid's fantasy, says Rex. It never happened. It never existed. It never could happen, says Rex. Just look in the history books I've had printed especially for you. And anyway, says Rex, look at yourselves. You hate each other. You are evil. You beat each other up. You're nothing better than wild animals. You need a strong leader like me to keep you in line. If you were set loose and free to have all the toys, what would you do? You'd kill each other and burn the kindergarten down. I'm going to make you all read Lord of the Flies just to prove it. You're bad. That's why I'm in charge, says Rex. And you know what? The children agree with him. We're bad, they say. We can't trust each other. We have criminal natures. We need to be ruled. They believe every word of this because by now they're not children anymore. They've grown up and become what Rex wanted them to become. And they've forgotten their childhood dreams. They are adults. And they accept the world the way it is, the way it has to be. Utopias are fairy tales, children's stories. It's only a story. It doesn't explain everything. We haven't got all day to explain everything. One thing though, in the game I said that the person in charge of the kindergarten invented the game one day, invented the idea of private property and started by giving all the toys to one child. Of course, private property wasn't suddenly invented one day, and it didn't all suddenly fall in the hands of one person. It took a long time. It evolved. If this is the time humans have been around on this planet, then this is about when we invented settled farming and stopped being hunter-gatherers, about 12,000 years ago. Yesterday, really, in fact. So for about 250,000 years, we've been hunter-gatherers, tribal, primitive, nomadic. Hunter-gatherers had private property, personal effects, bead necklaces, favourite flint knives, that sort of thing. Some of it was valuable too, it meant a lot to them. But hunter-gatherers were travellers. They had to follow the herds and the wild game, or actually the vegetation. Since most of their diet was the gathering, not the hunting, they tended to pick an area clean and then move on. Either way, to them, private property was something you had to be able to carry. Small things. Things that were nice but personal, private. Maybe good for swapping. Little treasures of your own. People think the pyramids are ancient. You have no idea how modern, how recent they are in the human story. Hunter-gatherers had no use for monuments and houses and things they couldn't take with them. No point staking claim to a piece of land. For most of the time humans have been on this planet, private property was small items, often beautifully made in gold, but still just portable trinkets. The point is that property existed, but it wasn't an issue. But around 12,000 years ago, farming developed. People stayed put on the land to farm it. And in view of the work they were putting in, they needed to defend it. So the land itself became property. And then it all changed, because private property of land was very definitely an issue, a life or death issue. If you had land, you could live. If you didn't, you'd die. And that's when you got your pyramids and your cities and your Stonehenges and your hill forts. When I made up this kindergarten game, I pretended that private property was suddenly invented. It wasn't. But it suddenly acquired an enormous significance 12,000 years ago that it didn't have before. The agricultural revolution was the beginning of a society that didn't just include the concept of private property. It was actually based on it, built on it, like pyramids are built on the earth. I also lied about all the property being given to one person. It wasn't. Not at first, anyway. So what happened there? The bottom line is, if 10 people start with 10p each, eventually one person will own a pound and 9 people will have nothing. That's how property society works. It's like the game of Monopoly. Eventually one person wins everything and everyone else has nothing. Property society may have been equal when it started off, but it didn't stay equal for very long, and it's never been equal since. Capitalism is a big version of the kindergarten game, but the stakes are a lot higher. Imagine playing Death Monopoly, where the rule was that every player who lost all their houses had to have a bullet in the head. You wouldn't play, would you? Capitalism is like a game of Monopoly with life or death outcomes. And we don't have any choice but to play. Our ideology, that word again, tells us that competition is what makes everything happen. Well, competition is usually what games are about. And it can be lots of fun when it's a game. Cooperative games aren't usually that exciting. But we're talking about amusement, not life and death. Forcing people to play a competitive game where most of the rules are rigged to begin with and the outcomes can be fatal is not funny. It's pretty sick. We think competition runs the world, but all it does is keep us running, often for sheer terror. Another viewpoint is that cooperation is really the strategy we need. to run the world. Our ideology says no. But we have to cooperate over the rules, even to play the game of capitalism. We have to agree cooperatively to compete. So cooperation is not foreign to us, it's basic to us. Even in capitalism, we already cooperate. It's just that we're cooperating against our real interests. The players in the death monopoly game must have agreed cooperatively to the rules, or else they wouldn't be playing it. So why are we still playing it? Our ideology says that it's the only game there is. Is it? Alternatively, the reason we are still playing this competitive game is that we simply haven't decided not to play it anymore. As long as we accept the rules, the game has to continue. The question is, given a free choice, do you accept those rules? So we all agree on private ownership of the toys, the wealth, what we call property. Property doesn't mean that you have the freedom of access to something. It means that you can deny that freedom of access to everyone else. Unless you're rich, property doesn't make you free. It puts you in chains. Think about this. If I could own the air you breathe, in other words, deny you access to it, I would be master of the world, and you would all be my slaves. You might not think that was very fair, but fairness has nothing to do with it. That's how the rule of property works, and we've all agreed to it. Everything, trade, markets, competition, scarcity, wars, poverty and the rest, they all stem from this one principle. It's a sacred principle. It's older and more sacred than the Bible or the Quran. It's more sacred than life itself, or at least that's the way we've been taught. Ideology. And because of that ideology, we believe it's right that the rich should be rich and the poor just have to be poor. And so the game continues. What you have to do is ask yourself why you're playing this game of private property and what you're really getting out of it. Now, you might own some property, most of us do. You might even own your own house or car, although you've probably got them both on credit that it'll take a lifetime to pay off. Instead of that, ask yourself what security you really have. You still have to work. You could always lose your job. And you live on a planet which is heating up while the chimneys go on belching smoke and the politicians go on belching smoke screens. This game we're playing, it's not going to last forever. When the forests are finally gone and the ice caps finally melted, it may be too late then to question these rules, death monopoly. There may not be any property left worth owning. Some people say that capitalism is the end of history. In fact, arguably, capitalism may be the end of us. So is there an alternative then? If private property is the rule, what happens if you abolish the rule? Capitalism is built on private property. If you abolish one, you have to abolish the other, and everything that's part of it, the whole market system. That's money and banks and insurance and credit and debt and rents and mortgages and loans and wages. This probably sounds like abolishing civilization as you know it. Well, not necessarily. Since most of these things give you nothing but grief and stress, it could also sound like abolishing most of your problems at one stroke.